Hello and welcome back to Reality Remake. Today we're going to be talking about 7 tips and tricks for beginners for Rumble VR. This is a fantastic and unique VR game that's like being an earthbender in the universe of Avatar: The Last Airbender. In this VR game, you can do martial arts moves to create and launch big pieces of stone at your opponent in 1v1 PvP battles. Rumble is great because it's the sort of experience that can only be made for virtual reality, with the hand controls needed to replicate the complex martial arts moves needed to make a pillar of stone and launch it forward. Still, Rumble can be a pretty hard game to get the hang of, partially due to its uniqueness. If you're having trouble and want to dominate the arena of stone, or just want to play more smoothly and skillfully, here are some tips and tricks to help you out. Starting with number 1, knock your opponent off the edge. If you're having trouble landing hits on an opponent, or are low on health and want a way to quickly come back for a victory, then always keep in mind that knocking your opponent off of the edge of the arena is an instant win. Even if you have the advantage, quickly pushing your opponent off of the arena can win the round before they have a chance to come back. You don't even have to push them all the way off. Just get them close to the edge of the arena, about on top of the metal ring on the edge, and they'll start sliding off. The best way to start pushing your opponent towards the edge is to take control of the middle of the arena and send attacks outwards towards them. Once you have control of the middle, the only way your opponent can flee from your attacks is backwards towards the edge or sideways. Once you have this position, push them as much as possible by launching pillars or other solid stone pieces at them. If they aren't paying attention, you can trick them into backpedaling off of the edge or push them off with one of your hits before they realize what kind of danger they're in. Even if they do realize that they're nearing the edge, that still gives you an advantage. Since falling off is an instant defeat, the other player will do whatever they can to get away from the edge, which gives you extra opportunities to attack them. For instance, the disc move is a very reliable way to do damage, and it can be very tempting to spam quickly at an unguarded opponent, but every time you launch a disc, it will send you a little bit backwards. Another player that realizes they're close to the edge will not use the disc nearly as much, because they don't want to fall off, giving you an opportunity to hit them as they try to run towards you away from the edge. At the same time, you can bait a player who is close to the edge and doesn't realize it so that they use the disc move as much as possible. If you have the health to withstand it, you can trick them into setting themselves off of the edge by failing to guard yourself or by acting as though you aren't doing your moves correctly, making them think they have an opportunity to do damage to you when they're really about to fall. For another tip, make sure you practice. Speaking of doing your moves correctly, you won't be able to do much of anything out in the arena if you don't land them. So make sure you can land your moves before you actually start a match. Every time you start the game, make sure to take a step into the practice area and try each of your moves out at least once. It can be easy to slightly misremember the way a certain ability is done, and it's much better to realize this when you're at the practice terminal. There is nothing more frustrating than trying to use an ability during a match and it just failing to happen. Not only will this limit the amount of moves you can do, but the time you spend trying over and over to do something and failing to do it just gives the other player more time to do damage and punish you for failing. So make sure you spend a few minutes practicing and warming up each time you start playing Rumble. You will not regret it. For a more tactical tip, remember to focus on defense if you're flustered. Rumble can be a very intense VR game, and each move that you do needs to be done fairly precisely to actually activate its ability. This means that it's not uncommon to start messing up your moves when you're taking a lot of damage or are being pushed around. It's easy to take a lot of damage when you're trying to make something happen and failing. In these cases, just back off as much as you can and strafe around your opponent. If you have enough distance, then their attacks will miss you. Take a breather and get your bearings. You can even duck and weave around some attacks, like the disc, if one catches you off guard. Trying to stay on offense when you're not succeeding is not the right idea. Use a simple move like the pillar to create a wall between you and the other player to buy yourself some time. If they get close, you can always use the straight, another simple move, to launch a pillar at your opponent and get them to back off for a few more seconds. Focusing on defense when you are at a disadvantage can buy you the time to refocus and properly land some of the more complex abilities and combinations. If you're having trouble with even the pillar and straight moves, then back off and strafe to the side to buy yourself a little time while you try to put up a pillar. Oh, but make sure you don't fall off the edge, and practice your moves after the match is over. Speaking of moves, totems give you new moves. Even though more moves does make the game more complex and means you have a lot more forms to master and remember, the more moves you have, then the more versatility you have in the arena. When you've played some matches and gained a rank, make sure to check the mailbox near the matchmaking console. Once you pull the lever on the front, then a little dumbbell will pop out of the top. take this dumbbell over to the move console and put it into the chute beside it. This will unlock new moves for you to learn and practice at the console. When practicing your new moves, make sure you don't forget your old ones. Having a few abilities you can use reliably is better than having a ton that you will not be able to pull off when you need them. Of course, more practice makes perfect, and the more abilities you can complete, the greater your chances of victory. Though you can't win if you can't find a match, so if you're having trouble finding a match, set the match finder to all ranks. Sometimes you might be playing at a time when not many others on your server are. You may set the slider to look for opponents of your rank or close to your rank. Waiting in virtual reality kinda sucks though. So if you want to wait as little as possible before finding a match, just set the match finder to any rank. Don't worry about being completely outclassed though. Opponents with ranks closer to yours will still be prioritized. While it will definitely hurt your chances of winning in the short term, the more matches you do, the better you will get at Rumble, even if they are against an opponent with more moves and more experience. Either way, you can always practice while you're waiting. You can also change which server you're playing in with the map, but using a server that's far away from where you are playing can cause a lot of lag. Lag is very hard to compensate for in a fast-paced game like Rumble. Though even if you want to know how many players are on each server, the map will tell you, as well as your ping. Now when you do get into a match, make sure to vary your moves. Just as varying between attack and defense is crucial depending on the situation and the actions of your opponent, varying how you attack and defend is just as important. When you start to unlock more moves than just the pillar, disc, and straight, you will have a lot of tools at your disposal once you master using them. It can be very tempting to just repeat the same move over and over again, especially with something like the disc, which is very easily spammable. Avoid this temptation. The other player will realize that you are spamming a single ability, and each ability has another that can counter it. For instance, disc spam can be easily stopped with a pillar, and then that pillar can be punched towards you with the straight. Then when you are backing away from the pillars, your opponent can flank you and hit you with discs of their own. Varying what attacks you use will mean that your opponent will use a variety of defensive or counter-offensive techniques. For instance, you could switch to throwing boulders at your opponents when they switch to pillars, since boulders can smash through pillars and damage your opponent, forcing them to change their strategy again. Doing this can fluster them and cause them to fail their moves, or make them forget that they are close to the edge. So don't just rely on one attack when facing a skilled enemy, because they will punish you for it. Though the only thing more punishing is being exhausted, so make sure to give yourself a break. This last tip might seem obvious, but sometimes obvious things are the most important to do and the easiest to ignore. If you are an average person, then Rumble VR can be very tiring unless you're training for a marathon or something. Some sweat and sore arms are to be expected when a good match has you playing vigorously, but constant arm movements will probably leave you sore and even out of breath. If you want to keep playing effectively, then give yourself a break in between matches. Get a drink of water and give your arms a chance to recover for a few minutes before jumping into another game. Trying to complete moves when it feels like you can barely lift your arms is really tough and will lead to more mistakes and likely more losses than you should have. Entering each match a little more fresh and rested will mean that you can land more abilities and win more games. Leave a like if these tips and tricks helped you out. If you'd like to see some more advanced tips and tricks for Rumble, then let me know in the comments. You can also subscribe if you'd like to see more videos about virtual reality games like this one. This has been Reality Remake. Good luck out there in the arena.